year, team owners will discuss possible expansion. It was not something that was spoken about during the league's Board of Governors meetings, but it is something that is being looked at. There are multiple cities in the United States that could be future NBA cities, including cities like Las Vegas and Seattle. Of course, for Seattle, it would be a return to the NBA there. The Pittsburgh Steelers are starting the week with Justin Fields taking the top quarterback reps as Russell Wilson continues to be banged up. Right now, it seems likely Fields will start against the Broncos. With Progressive, you can bundle auto and home insurance, renter's insurance, or condo insurance, and you're going to save with Progressive. I'm Matt Pauley with the SportsGrid Sports Flash powered by The Score.
Welcome to Staples.
Hi, I need a printer for the office.
Staples has the best brands, like HP.
Well, I have some demands.
Oh.
Burton Sales demands it be fast.
HP's Office Jet Pro is super fast.
Megan Marketing demands color prints.
Check.
And Kurt the Controller demands I don't overpay.
With Staples Hot Deals, you get up to 40% off select HP printers.
Oh, great. My job can be...
Demanding?
I was gonna say a lot of fun.
Right now at Staples, save up to 40% on select HP printers, America's most trusted printer brand. Ends 9/28.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards concert tickets for your daughter to see that singer who sings about painful breakups. And one song will inspire your little beauty to break up with that beast she's dating, Brian. Instead, she'll date someone who's nice and worthy of her love, not someone who addresses you and your spouse as bro. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, not available in all states.
No way football is playing in the fall and winter.
Because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Off and running in today's edition of Football Full Circle, right here on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Sirius Channel 159, Lisi and Wetzel in the cockpit, taking you around the NFL for the next hour. We'll get into some breakdowns and some news and notes around the league. But, Scott, I'll lead off by talking about the viewership in regards to the NFL. I don't know if you saw this. 21 million viewers per game for the NFL. That's a record. People love football, and it obviously showcased that with those numbers after week number 1.
Well, it's amazing, right? You know, you could have the debate. Do soccer fans in Europe love soccer more than American fans here in the States love the football stuff? I don't know. But they just embrace football at a time when baseball should be, in its best race, right? All the pennant races and division races and everything else. School, everyone's all distracted with all the issues going back to school with their kids and everything. And what still takes center stage, Joe, is the NFL football. So, yeah, it's tough to beat. It's tough to beat, man. It's amazing.
It is, and the gambling perspective adds to that, right? When you could gamble on Monday and Thursday night action, maybe you don't have that marquee type of game. You know you're going to have people tune in no matter what the network, right? Whether it be Amazon Prime or now there's certain situations in regards to, DirecTV moving on and having all the games on YouTube. I mean, it is, a lot of changing and moving parts, but the one thing that is constant, people love the game, and more importantly, they love to gamble on it. So you're starting to see those numbers now spike in regards to record amounts in 2024. And that's the other thing as well, Scott, right? Why go out in regards to spending, let's say, lunch or dinner when you could just sit at home or potentially go out and watch the game on your phone?
I really, two things, Joe. One, I take the train into the city from Long Island to New York City to go to the studios. And I'm telling you, Joe, there isn't a train ride that I don't hear at least one couple, one bunch of friends, guys, girls, older, younger, black, white, whatever the case may be, talk about gambling on something, whether it's hockey, baskets, when the Knicks are playing or when the Islanders are playing or Rangers. I mean, it really is just amazing. And I want to jump into the conversation, but I'm like, you know what? Just shut up and sit here. Just get into work before you started arguing, right? Because you're a Dolphin and a Red Sox fan. So
I got a Stone Cold lock this week. Hang on, right?
What my premium picks? Join me on SportsGrid. I'll give you the opposite pick of the day. So people love it. It is amazing. and all the big games and everything else, we're riding on it. So it is remarkable how much people like to gamble on this stuff.
It is, and we'll start off with that big matchup on Thursday night. It's an AFC East rivalry. We saw this game go down to the wire in regards to week number 17 last year in South Beach. Miami opens up as a 2.5-point favorite. 48.5 is the total in regards to this matchup. Buffalo struggled, right? 6.5-point favorite at home against Arizona. They fell behind 17-3. They get the win 34-28, but no cover. And that defense did not look as good as maybe people have thought. A lot of moving parts as well, new pieces in regards to that secondary. It's going to take a while. But one thing is certain. We know that potentially we have two high-octane offenses, Scotty. Miami with the passing attack of Tua, and maybe the rushing attack of Buffalo should be a great game tomorrow night.
Yeah, you got to check the weather. Hurricanes coming into town, hitting the south there, unfortunately. Boy, the weather's just been crazy. So definitely check the weather for the game tomorrow and see how close it is and if they get the rains and the winds that they're expecting. Rain, I wouldn't worry too much about, but if it's heavy rain and it's gusty, then obviously you have to concern yourself. I don't know how the Dolphins lose this game, though, Joe. I do like them a lot. Short week, very difficult for Thursday games for the road team to perform well. They have. But, with all the stuff in favor of Miami because of that, because the way they lost last year, as you mentioned, to Buffalo, they should have a major, major chip on their shoulder. That cost them the division. They had to be a wild card team. We know what happened from there. I would think everything would lean towards Miami. Neither team played particularly well week number one, but and both were able to come back from 2 touchdown deficits or double-digit deficits anyway to get the win. But Miami at home, we know how badly they play on the road against good teams. You've got to win this game if you're the Dolphins. It's kind of like with Baltimore against Kansas City last Thursday, Joe. I said this. I said, how can a Raven fan honestly look himself in the mirror if they don't beat Kansas City and say we're serious Super Bowl contenders? Because they lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs at home last year. If they lose again, I mean, how you can't realistically do it. And that's, I think, what the Dolphins situation is. How could you seriously take yourself as a serious Super Bowl contender if you just can't beat these good teams? And they've shown they can. They have done so at home on occasion, but they've got to win this game, Joe. They have.
See, I agree with you in the sense of looking at them as a contender, right? And I didn't like them at the start of the year to win the AFC East. Still thought Buffalo was the team to beat because of Josh Allen. And again, I look at that defense, Scotty, and we could discuss it. They gave up a ton of yards to Jacksonville on the ground last week. Hank Bigsby, 72, Travis Etienne. If he doesn't fumble the football, that outcome might be a little bit different, right? That defense, to me, has concerns. And if there is going to be potentially bad weather, I still lean to the over because I think by game time we'll be okay. But let's take your scenario. Bad weather, right? It'll be lower scoring. Can they shut down Josh Allen and James Cook in the rushing attack? Even in regards to a sloppy field, that would be the concern for me in terms of back in Miami. I actually like the other side with Buffalo.
I mean, listen, they didn't stop him last week, as you said, but I'm going to kind of throw out last week for both teams, but more so for Miami. With Ty Hill getting, whatever he got the other day, hours before the game. It might work to the Dolphins' advantage that it's a short week since they don't have to deal with that nonsense. If it was a longer week, maybe they would. They get back into the grind, mental chip on their shoulder. Yeah, I'm hoping that the Dolphin defense can step up. They've beaten Buffalo before at home, not on the road, but at home. So basically it's an even game, and I'm getting them less than a field goal 9 times out of 10. Not all the time, but 9 times out of 10, I'll take the home team, and that's the Dolphins in this case, especially being a Thursday night.
Now, do you believe after watching Aaron Rodgers and the Jets last night, on Monday, seeing how that game transpired, seeing what New England did to Cincinnati, again, they got lucky, I believe. Not a discount to Gerard Mayo, but I think big picture we're in agreement. Jacoby Brissett is not leading this team to potentially 9 or 10 wins and challenge for a second, in terms of in the division, right? So if Miami does lose this, let's say tomorrow night, big picture, are you confident that Tua is the guy, number one, and Mike McDaniel's the coach, even though they give him an extension, right? Is he the coach to lead us to the promised land?
Well, I mentioned this with yesterday. The Dolphins had the ball closing the game out, right? Tie game. settling for a field goal, Joe. They didn't settle for a 30-yard field goal or a 40-yard field goal. They settled for a 52-yard field goal. They just gave their quarterback a $40 million extension. They just gave their wide receiver a $25, $30 million extension. They just gave the dopey head coach, a contract extension. And this guy has so little confidence, apparently, in Tua and Ty Hill that he's running the ball, settling for a 50-plus yard field goal with a field goal kicker who admittedly is good, but just missed a 42-yarder 5 minutes ago. So
Ryan Day. He's like Ryan Day in Ohio State against Georgia.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, so win, lose, or draw tomorrow night, I'm not confident with Tua or McDaniels either way. If they can win 50-0, and I'm still not confident in them. I mean, I don't know, how do you settle for a 52-yard field goal when you just paid your best players all that money and your best players want to throw the ball? You don't have to throw 30-yard passes down the field. I get that, but you can't throw a little 5-yard slant, pick up 5, 6, 7 yards, and make it a 40-yarder? I mean, it was no big deal because they kicked a 52-yarder, right? So no one's talking about it. But I don't like to be hindsight 2020. I like to say that's dumb because a lot of times you're not going to hit that 50-yard field goal and you're going to lose the game in overtime.
I totally agree. I agree. And I'm not big on Mike McDaniel as head coach. I think he beats up on lesser opponents, sub-500 type of teams. When the game is on the line against teams like Buffalo, or more importantly, a playoff game, he doesn't step up. We'll come back with more news and notes around the NFL. Keep it where it is.
Fall is coming.
Don't look like an idiot at work. Know your stuff. Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Deshaun Watson is again under a spotlight away from the field. The NFL said Tuesday it is investigating the latest civil lawsuit filed against the Cleveland Browns quarterback for an alleged sexual assault that took place in 2020 while he played for Houston. On Monday, a woman in Texas accused Watson of sexually assaulting her during an incident at her apartment 4 years ago. She claims Watson sexually forced himself on her for several minutes. At this point, he is expected to play Sunday when the Browns visit the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Supreme Court of Maryland heard arguments Tuesday about the constitutionality of a 2023 law that ended the state statute of limitations for child sexual abuse lawsuits following a report that exposed widespread wrongdoing within the Archdiocese of Baltimore. The arguments, which lasted several hours, largely focused on the intent of the Maryland legislature when it passed a preceding law in 2017 that said people in Maryland who were sexually abused as children could bring lawsuits up until they turned 38. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
If I was to describe this sandwich in one word, I would say magical. Hi, this is Jamor, and the little thing that I love about the Chick-fil-A honey pepper pimento chicken sandwich is that extra oomph. I go back and forth from the spicy filet to the original filet. I get into the sweetness of the honey, then you have the extra kick from the spicy filet. The combination alone takes it over the top. It's award-winning.
The Chick-fil-A Honey Pepper Pimento Chicken Sandwich is back with a bite. Try it with the original or spicy filet, now for a limited time. Real guests paid for their testimonial.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2024 Bank of America N.A.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Back on Football Full Circle, Lisi and Wetzel getting you prepped and ready in regards to the week number 2 action. Scotty, did want to ask you in regards to the bounce back performances, right? Any team or teams that really stuck out to you that really need to make a better effort to get back on track? One for me was the Cleveland Browns.
It's funny. That's exactly where I was going to go. It's interesting, Joe. They only have a couple of games this week in which 1-1 teams face each other. Just out of quirkiness, it's either 2-2 or 1-0 versus 1-0, or 0-1 versus 0-1. But there's not too many 1-0s versus 0-1s is what I should have said. So it's kind of like those 0-1 versus 0-1s, Cleveland and Jacksonville. That's right where I was going to go. But the Browns, I had hopes for the Browns, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. They find out Nick Chubb's going to miss the first 4 weeks. Okay, they should be able to survive that. They did last year at the end of the season when Joe Flacco came on board. Then they play as poorly as you could possibly play against Dallas, right? You didn't know what you were going to get out of that game. I didn't, but I figured the Browns at home would win. And Deshaun Watson, who I've been a big fan of on the field, I tried to defend him as much as I possibly could. But, man, watching him play, you really just have to begin to wonder whether whatever magic he had in college or his first few years in Houston just has not materialized in Cleveland. They take on the Jaguars. They're 0-1, both in similar spots there. Who's going to be 0-2? You can probably count on one or two hands how many 0-2 teams really rally and win their respective divisions. That's the game that's most intriguing to me. Which team you go 0-2, and boy, you're really going down a rabbit's hole. So I think Jacksonville is probably the better of the two. They're at home, played certainly better this past week. Should have won the Dolphin game. I mean, it just fell apart second half, but that's an interesting game to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this about the Cleveland Browns, big picture. They have to make a decision on Deshaun Watson, right? Again, you want to give them the keys to the bus this week. That's fine. They're playing Jacksonville. We know going in regards to Duval County, not very, easy to play. Not only that, but think about last year. They dominated this game with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, I think, had a dynamic performance against Jacksonville. So again, if you want a telltale, indicator about what the offense looks like with Deshaun Watson and what it looked like with Joe Flacco, look back to last year. Now, Trevor Lawrence, in regards to that game, was a little bit banged up. He came off the ankle injury. The rushing attack was non-existent last year. Again, Scotty, this offense cannot dink and dunk its way to an AFC North championship. They just can't do it. And they can't do it with Deshaun Watson turning the football over. They can't rely solely on the rushing attack, especially with Nick Chubb out of that lineup. Jerome Ford is good. He's not elite, right? So you tell me, are you trying to win games 13-10, or are you trying to win them 40-20 like they were trying to do last year with Joe Flacco? 4 games over 300 yards last year with Flacco. Deshaun Watson in a Cleveland Brown uniform over the past year and a half, 2 years, has none.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it was like night and day, literally, when Flacco got in there. I mean, it was just, most quarterbacks don't see that big of a drop. And a lot of them obviously don't see any, increase, but they went to the backup quarterback, and in a lot of ways, the third stringer after Dorian Thompson and all the others that they tried to put in there. And it was just like, oh my God, this is the Cleveland Browns. And what did the Browns do? I really do believe, I don't know if they would ever admit this, but I really think they were afraid of keeping Flacco around, Joe, because they were worried about the fan base saying, one bad performance out of Watson, what are we doing playing Deshaun Watson?
Right.
Instead they bring in Jameis Winston, who's a capable backup, but they're probably lucky that this game is in Jacksonville, because I'm telling you, that fan base, you look at the fan bases, whether it's the New York Giant fan base or the Cleveland Browns fan base, or maybe even the Atlanta Falcons fan base. You all got viable backup quarterbacks or situations that are so bad that the fans are ready to turn their team after 1 week.
No, absolutely, Scotty, and that's where I wanted to go. In the preseason, they did keep 4 quarterbacks on that roster. They got rid of Huntley, that re-signed in regards to Baltimore. He's back with his old team, but they did have Winston, to your point. They also had DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, in regards to, a mobile backup. He is the third string for the Cleveland Browns. They're 3.5-point dogs now on the road against Jacksonville. Like I mentioned, in Duval County, Jacksonville, a very good home team. We know that they step up for the most part against better teams in the AFC and even the NFC, knocking off the competition. So that'll be, whether they step up, Cleveland, in regards to this matchup. I will say 41.5, Scotty, to me, is a little bit light. And I understand the perception in regards to that. What are you going to get out of Deshaun Watson? What are you going to get in regards to the offense? But I actually, if I had to pick this game right now, I love the over. 41.5. I think that, to me, is going to be a contrarian play in the sense of, if you're Cleveland, you want to erase last week. You want to score first, put the game on Trevor Lawrence. And you know what? What I saw out of the rushing attack last week from Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, that offensive line is cooking. I think it could hum and they could put up some points as well. So give me the over in this matchup.
Yeah, I agree. The Cleveland defense was great last season at home, but awful. And I mean awful on the road, right? And what we saw out of that defense last week at home wasn't good. So if they're going to play their better defense at home, then last week's performance against Dallas tells you that they're more than capable of giving up another 30 points this week. And certainly they're not going to be calling off the dogs, pardon the pun, if they grab a 2-touchdown lead like they did against the Dolphins. So the points are coming. I think we get some points this week. I do from most games, including this one. I like the over as well.
Now, let me ask you this, because you and I talked about this in regards to the offseason, right, prior to the season. We thought Cleveland could be a sleeper. I actually thought Deshaun Watson would be better than what he was. Somehow, somewhere, they drop this game. They go to 0-2. One, do you turn the keys over to Winston? And two, do you still feel confident enough that maybe this defense and this team can bounce back to be a contender?
Can't turn it over to him. Not just yet. It's way, way too soon. You get too much money committed in Watson. You just can't do it.
All right, we'll come back. We'll talk about some of the other breakdowns for week number 2. Keep it where it is.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
1985, Pete Rose of the Reds gets career hit number 4,192 off of Eric Shaw of the Padres, eclipsing Ty Cobb's hit record.
2-1 pitch from Shaw into left center. There it is. Rose has eclipsed Cobb. That's number 4,192.
For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
Purdue University physicists have opened the world's first quantum disco with the world's tiniest disco ball. And by tiny, I mean a disco ball 1/100th the width of a human hair, made of glowing fluorescent nanodiamonds levitating inside a pure vacuum, spinning 1.2 billion times per minute. The point? Not to improve your platform shoe disco finger, but to simulate what happens to qubits inside a quantum computer. Computing power that could be 150 billion times faster than yesterday's supercomputer. And that's a lot cooler than John Travolta doing the funky chicken. Follow me at Capalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Grady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere, even while the wife's talking to you.
if you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Continuing the conversation about the week 1 performances, and can we get momentum in week number 2, or could teams just get upset? We talked about the situation with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland going on the road to Jacksonville. Another marquee battle, Scotty, is that battle in Dallas, the Cowboys and the Saints. You saw the Saints absolutely put up a 47 spot on Carolina. The offense looked pretty good with Derek Carr, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, opportunistic, completely made Bryce Young and that offense one-dimensional. I actually think that's the New Orleans Saints offense is up against it going into Dallas. 46.5 is the total. I lean to the under, but I would still take Dallas minus the 6.5 and the under. I need to see 2 weeks with Carr in that offense before I completely buy in.
Yeah, I know. You don't like Derek Carr. I get it. I'm on the Saints. I was on them last year and everything else, and they completely flopped last year. And Dennis Allen, we all get it. Dead man walking in New Orleans, right? Just awful numbers for him and Derek Carr as favorites, but pretty good, though, in the role as an underdog. You're getting almost a touchdown here. Don't like the over. I think that's the benefit of, the Saints putting 47 up on the board and Dallas putting 33. I do think this will be a lower scoring game. Like, I don't think the Saints are going to go into this thing thinking, okay, we're going to win a shootout here, right? They're going to have to go into this thing thinking we're going to run the ball, keep it away from Dak, and win this 20-17. That's the Saints' way. So it's a pretty good parlay to me. Either take Dallas in the over or Saints in the under. I think the Saints, I'm going to buy in. I know it was Carolina last week, but it was a dominating performance. 17-0 first quarter. Game was over against the great Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. Let's go, Derek Carr. You drink it from the fountain of youth. And plus, I need his 3,200 yards passing or 3,300 yards passing. So if it gets into a shootout, I'm okay with that as well, as long as he throws for 300 yards.
Well, here's the thing. It's not so much that I'm down on Derek Carr. I'm down on Dennis Allen. I don't believe, I actually believe Carr is an above-average quarterback. I wouldn't mind him if I had a team to start a franchise. I would take him. I actually think he's a very good passer. He understands how and where to go in regards to the passing tree, can read coverage. He's not elite, and he's certainly not on Pat Mahomes's or, any other Jalen Hurts, in that regard. Right, but he's an above-average quarterback that can lead a team. He's not Gardner Minshew. Let's, where he's a backup, and Gardner's just a riverboat gambler and will give you the most. Carr has a pretty good arm and can lead a team. So I agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: I watched that defense. They need that defense to be elite, in my opinion, to win it. If they're forcing 2 and 3 turnovers every game, you're absolutely right. That defense can maybe carry them to an NFC championship, because I was very impressed. Now, part of that, I think, was Canales and Bryce Young being that bad that they played right into them. But you're right. That is an above-average defense. And if they play like that, well, then you know what? You might as well take a shot at the NFC title at 26-1.
Yeah. I tell you, the NFC South may not end up being as bad as people think. Like last year, it was as competitive, but they were all mediocre or bad. This year, Tampa Bay looked very good. They won that division 3 straight times. They came a last-minute play from reaching the NFC Championship game last year. If they would have had a last-minute drive against Detroit. The Saints are pretty good. I don't know what we're going to get out of the Falcons, but on paper, they should be better this year, right? Despite what they did against Pittsburgh. And Carolina's going to stink, but you got like 3 actually competitive teams. None of them are going to, put 55 points on the board. And we still aren't buying into Tampa Bay despite all the success they've had over the last few years, with the Super Bowl and everything else with Tom Brady. But it's really not that bad of a division, to tell you the truth.
No, it's not outside of Carolina. You're right. Those 3 teams can be competitive. Now, here's where I'll disagree with you in regards to that breakdown. I actually buy into Baker and Tampa Bay. They showed me something last week. I believe that offense, when he's on Baker, he's got that quarterback to wide receiver relationship with Mike Evans, Rashad White. He catch the football out of the backfield. There's weapons there. Kate Otten in regards to the tight end. I like what they have. They played Detroit this week, and I like them plus the 7 points. It's a rematch of that divisional game last year. They were in it. Baker had a pretty good performance. They knock off Detroit, Scotty. They started the year 35-40-1 to win the NFC. They're 26-1. That price is not going to be there after Sunday. That's something to think about when we come back in regards to how we value Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield big picture, because they knock off Detroit outright, things will change. Coming back with more NFC.
The Winning Edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
AutomotiveMap.com presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash powered by The Score. Looking at the schedule of Major League Baseball games today, there are a handful of day games with the Marlins at the Pirates, Guardians at the White Sox, Mets at the Blue Jays, and Rangers at the Diamondbacks. And then some of the notable games that are going to be taking place tonight. The Braves and Nationals play in Washington. The Braves and Mets are tied for the final wildcard spot in the National League. Rays are going to match up against the Phillies on the road. Padres and Mariners play tonight in Seattle. Brewers at the Giants and the Cubs. They match up against the Dodgers. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver indicating that at some point this season, team owners will discuss the idea of possible league expansion. With Progressive, you can bundle auto and home insurance, renter's insurance, or condo insurance, and you're going to save with Progressive. I'm Matt Pauley with the SportsGrid Sports Flash powered by The Score.
I'm still going for it, even with higher stroke risk from atrial fibrillation and a regular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Over a 3-year study, Eliquis apixaban tablets reduce stroke risk better than warfarin, and over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke. A first stroke occurred in 2.9% of warfarin patients versus 2.3% of Eliquis patients.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without asking your doctor. It may increase your stroke risk. Eliquis can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding, unusual bruising, or tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. Medications such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners may increase bleeding risk. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
Days are getting cooler.
The shadows are getting longer.
You know what that means?
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Lisi and Wetzel breaking down week number 2 of the NFL season. We left off talking about the NFC South. Pretty good division outside of Carolina. You got New Orleans, you have Atlanta, and Tampa Bay, which is where we left off talking about Baker Mayfield and that performance last week against Jaden Daniels and Washington. That offense was humming in the first half. Defense completely shut down the Washington offense in the first half. Was pretty intrigued on how Jaden Daniels did move the football in regards to the second half. We can get into that later, Scotty. But I brought up the fact that 26-1 right now before this game Sunday against Detroit. They get this outright win in Detroit. They're going to be 2-0. They're going to have an inside edge in regards to the conference, right? And more importantly, the division. That'll probably be 14 or 15-1. And in the preseason, they were getting no respect at 40 and 42-1 respectively.
And they really weren't. I'm a little surprised at that. You know, they brought everybody back. They paid the money. They brought Baker back and actually got him on a reasonable contract. You know, he's only making like $35 million a year. Yeah, which you know, for a quarterback these days is like, oh my gosh, you got him on the junk heap, right? Pile. So yeah, you know, it's a big step from actually, you know, winning the division to winning the NFC, but this is worth a game and a half since they only played Detroit one time. So you would win the head-to-head tiebreaker if it did come down to, you know, best record. So this would be a huge game. I do like playing on teams that lost the year before in the playoffs, as they did, obviously, to Detroit. Letdown game for the Rams, for the Lions, right? After playing the Rams, big emotional Sunday night game. Now they got goofy Tampa Bay. Who cares? Meanwhile, it's the Super Bowl, if you will, for Tampa Bay because they remember what happened. And they had the ball down one score, 2 minutes left. If Baker didn't throw the pick, if he could have had a last-minute drive like we see 1,000 times happen, then, they would have won that game, but they didn't. So give credit to the Lions. But this is a good spot for Tampa Bay. I definitely like the points. And if they could actually pull off the straight-up win, and they had some really good road wins. They had some bad losses, but they had some good road wins, surprising wins last year.
Right.
Start the season against Minnesota being one of them, so that they can compete against the teams in the NFC North. So I like Tampa Bay's chances, and that's not a bad thing. Now, will they win? Maybe not. When everything is said and done, Joe. But the idea is to have a ticket that you can hedge on, in the playoffs, and they're not going to be 26-1 if they get into the postseason. Like you said, they will not be 26-1. I'm telling you right now.
And here's the other thing, Scotty, in regards to the MVP markets and everything else. Baker throws for 289 last week, right? I mean, 289. He was one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL with Jordan Love last year. He averaged well over 270 yards down the stretch over the last 8 games, 9 games of the regular season. I'm just saying, they get this victory over Detroit, which is everybody's favorite, right? Everybody loves Detroit and Dan Campbell. They upset them, and Baker goes off for 280 to 300. And I'm just saying, let's say they win the division yet again, 4th straight year in a row, and Baker throws for over 4,000 yards this year. But let's just say 28 touchdowns. Is he potentially a shot on the MVP? I mean, it's worth taking. If we're taking a shot, I'm just saying, if we're taking a shot on Tampa Bay, here, you love lottery tickets, right? We love dark horses.
Right.
I still buy into Matt Stafford preseason at 30-1. Offensive line is a concern now, so that looks a little difficult, right?
Puka out.
Right, Puka out, right? But there's still Cooper Kupp. That can carry you still to 10 wins. We know that, right? And it's McVay. You can never count him out. With Tampa, if they go 12 wins, that overexceeds expectations. They win the division, and if Baker's statistically in the top 5 in regards to the NFL from a passing perspective, isn't it worth rolling the dice?
Yeah, probably. If there's no other storylines, right? If no one else, if Kirk Cousins doesn't lead Atlanta to that division championship, and it is Tampa Bay, you eliminate him from the from that storyline picture. I don't know if they're really ready to give it to Brock Purdy or not. He's got so many weapons. I don't know if he'll ever get the credit that he probably deserves. Right? It'll always be somebody else, so it won't be him. Stafford's now got some injuries.
Jalen, depending upon what Dak and Jalen do, right?
Yeah.
In regards to-
Those would be the other two.
They're not going to give it to Lamar. They're not going to give it to Lamar again, right?
No.
Especially
and I think
based
they're done
off
with
last
Mahomes.
year. Right.
Yeah. And I think they've had their fill of hat. It's a possibility.
I'm just saying, as a lottery ticket, do I actually think that it would come to fruition? Absolutely not. But if we're talking value, you're talking 60, 70, 80-1, and he's already got a jump in terms of beating the second best team in the conference in their building. Now, all of a sudden, you bring all the eyes to the Tampa Bay Bucks, and again, I still think they're the most complete team in the division. I am not sold, Scotty, on Atlanta, and I don't care what people say. I know there's talent there, and I know Kirk Cousins is a compiler, but if we're talking quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins has one playoff marquee win under his belt. Baker has 2. Baker has the Cleveland win with Pittsburgh, and he has the win last year in regards to the Eagles, right? So he gets the edge over Kirk in that type of situation.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Kirk Cousins might not be starting quarterback at the end of the season.
I would love that. Scotty, I would love that. I would love that. I would love to see Kirk Cousins in Atlanta limp to a 6-11 record when everybody was by 12-1 to win what were they? To win the NFC, right? 30-1 to win the Super Bowl on a quarterback that's never won a marquee playoff game outside the win in New Orleans 6 years ago. And that was more about Drew Brees being at the end of his career than anything else.
This guy lost to Danny Nichols in the playoffs, when they lost to the Giants at home, no less. That is
unbelievable.
Listen, we all know from the outset that was set up for disaster the moment they drafted Michael Penix Jr. It's just you can't draft a quarterback that high after you just signed a guy to a 4-year, basically 3-year guaranteed contract. You knew something was going to go awry, and in the week, it's only week 1. I get that, but that's a game against Pittsburgh. You got to win that game, especially when you're throwing a backup quarterback, in Justin Fields at you. You have to win that game if you want to be taken seriously. And I'll tell you, it goes all the way back, Joe. And I love Raheem Morris, played over here at Hofstra. I was doing play-by-play, many moons ago when he was playing. So I know him well. from that standpoint, recognizing and everything else. But the day they chose him and Kirk Cousins, I do believe that was a package deal over Bill Belichick. That's where it's all it took the left turn instead of the right-hand turn.
You know who Raheem Morris is? And I'll give you a correlation, old school. Raheem Morris is a great coordinator. He's not a great head coach. Okay. Now, I thought the same about Bowles early on, and Bowles actually righted the ship, right? I think Canales was part of that. Obviously, the situation with Arians and having Tom Brady to learn from, I think helped. But he's Norv Turner 2.0, isn't he? A great coordinator, but as a head coach can never win big games and get the team to the promised land. This is a 500 team at best.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be bailing quickly on the Atlanta Falcons. Those were one of my 4 teams.
17-1.
Yeah.
They have the potential, Scott, to start 0-2. They play Philly on next Monday night. Do we really think that in prime time, he couldn't do it with Minnesota and Justin Jefferson? He's going to do it with the Atlanta Falcons on the road in that matchup?
Yeah. No. They're going to be 0-2. They're going to be calling... Yeah. How long do you got to stick with them? You got to give them the entire year, right? You would think. I don't know. Who's the quickest team to pull their starting quarterback? I mean, how long realistically does Carolina go with Bryce Young?
Well,
I mean, Cleveland.
5 games.
Cleveland, they got him locked in, Joe, for 2 more years, guaranteed money. Like he's listen. If there's a will, there's a way. But if you want to cut Watson, you got a $90 million cap hit after this season.
It is like the human anchor. He's the human anchor. We'll see how that plays out in Cleveland over the next few weeks. We'll come back. We'll talk some AFC teams right here on Football Full Circle. Keep it where it is.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Deshaun Watson is again under a spotlight away from the field. The NFL said Tuesday it is investigating the latest civil lawsuit filed against the Cleveland Browns quarterback for an alleged sexual assault that took place in 2020 while he played for Houston. On Monday, a woman in Texas accused Watson of sexually assaulting her during an incident at her apartment 4 years ago. She claims Watson sexually forced himself on her for several minutes. At this point, he is expected to play Sunday when the Browns visit the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Supreme Court of Maryland heard arguments Tuesday about the constitutionality of a 2023 law that ended the state statute of limitations for child sexual abuse lawsuits following a report that exposed widespread wrongdoing within the Archdiocese of Baltimore. The arguments, which lasted several hours, largely focused on the intent of the Maryland legislature when it passed a preceding law in 2017 that said people in Maryland who were sexually abused as children could bring lawsuits up until they turned 38. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
If I was to describe this sandwich in one word, I would say magical. Hi, this is Jamor, and the little thing that I love about the Chick-fil-A honey pepper pimento chicken sandwich is that extra ounce. I go back and forth from the spicy filet to the original filet. I get into the sweetness of the honey, then you have the extra kick from the spicy filet. The combination alone takes it over the top. It's award-winning.
The Chick-fil-A Honey Pepper Pimento Chicken Sandwich is back with a bite. Try it with the original or spicy filet, now for a limited time. Real guests paid for their testimonial.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2024 Bank of America N.A.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Continuing the conversation, we left off talking about the NFC North. We talked about Kirk Cousins in Atlanta with Tampa and Baker, and obviously the situation with Derek Carr. Scotty brought up Atlanta. So they play Philadelphia on Monday night. They then have to play Pat Mahomes and Kansas City. They have the potential to start 0-3. And then after that, Scott, right? New Orleans and Tampa Bay, 2 divisional games. If they start 0-5, the wheels will be off that wagon before you can even blink.
Yeah, that'll be it. Their season, like you said, I mean, barring something crazy, could they win in Philadelphia? I suppose, but, Kirk Cousins doesn't play well on these primetime games. We all know that they're going to be 0-3. So their season's going to be on the line those next 2 weeks. You go 1-2 out of those 2, or 1-1 out of those 2 games, but, then you got Carolina after that. So 2-4, maybe you could survive that if no one runs away with that division. But if you go 0-2 and you go 0-5 and even into the Carolina, that's it, right? You're done. You might as well pull Kirk Cousins to that. But then what do you do, Joe? I mean, you got all these teams with these quarterbacks that aren't going to be any good. That they're locked in. You throw them all in a heap. Let them go on a conference call with the Cleveland Browns and the Atlanta Falcons. And all these teams that have quarterbacks. Locked in for 3-4 more years, guaranteed money, and say, hey, you want my problem? I'll trade you my headache for yours if you want. That was a dumb contract to begin with. It was for Kirk Cousins.
Well, here's the thing. What do you have, 155 yards on Sunday? 155? Yeah. If he comes out against the Eagles, throws for 170, not even 200, and then comes out against that defense with Spagnuolo and is again under 200, guess what? You're cooked. That is not the quarterback. That's exactly what you had with Des Ridder and last year with Taylor Heineke, right? So now you're paying this guy, what, $50 million, $40 million? What's his price tag this year?
$40 million.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, 3 years guaranteed. So like 150 guaranteed money. 40.
Sorry, guy. You're not good. You're not taking us there. We might as well get the experience now because you just can't do it. I mean, and then if I'm blank, I'm looking at Raheem Morris. Is this the hire that I wanted? Right? I mean, that is the second biggest question. Is you had a coach in Arthur Smith that couldn't coach his way out of a paper bag with the talent that he had. Now you take on Morris. Is he potentially one and done? And then you're talking about a complete rebuild. Should have went to Belichick when you had the opportunity. To your point, I think it's a bad situation. I'm selling Atlanta. I was never high on them. But let's turn to the AFC. We talk about that game in MetLife on Sunday night. And, what I love Gerard Mayo and New England to get the outright win. Scott, if New England upsets Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, what a story. First of all, Gerard Mayo then all of a sudden catapults the coach of the year, doesn't he? They'd be 2-0, knocking off two of the better teams in regards to the AFC.
Well, they got New England. They got the Seattle this week. That game is the following week.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Maybe I flashed forward. I thought they were playing the Jets. I got ahead of myself. Oh God.
Yeah. But could you imagine if they are 2-0 into that Jet game? And that's a short week for the Jets too.
Yeah.
So that the Jets schedule is okay. Minnesota, New England, Tennessee this week. They're all winnable games, but the logistics, flying out to San Fran, Monday night game, then flying home, playing an early game, short week, and then flying out to Nashville for this weekend's game against Tennessee. Then they come home and play in New England on a short week. Like, the logistics of it all is very difficult. The teams aren't, but the logistics are for the Jets.
Yeah,
so,
I was looking ahead. I would take the 7 right now. As a look-ahead line, I would take the 7. You want to give me a flat 7 in regards to not even knowing what the situation is in Nashville? Yeah. And don't be shocked. I'm going to say this. I know Nashville gave away that game to Chicago, and Will Levis looked like it was a deer in the headlights. But that is not going to be an easy game for the Jets. I'm sorry. Knowing that, and the way you said, they went out to the West Coast, they come back, and now have to play Tennessee, I think Tennessee can keep this game close. I mean, that game, 3.5 point home dog in regards to that matchup. I'll take those points. Plus 154 on the money line as well.
Yeah. That opened up at 4.5, which I thought was kind of crazy. I mean, Tennessee should have won that game. Ben and I were talking about it. They should have won. I mean, Levis doesn't make that crazy play, and if the punter doesn't take 5 steps before he punts the freaking football, I mean, they took an hour and a half to punt the ball. They lose that game to the Bears. But, give the Bears credit. But, Tennessee, threw that game away. So I think that'll be a little more competitive. A low-scoring game, and you get over a field goal at home, I would take the Tennessee Titans too. And I'm not going to say that too often this year.
No, I know. And now I do want to bring up the battle in Kansas City, right? Burrow looked absolutely atrocious.
Horrible.
He throws for 164 yards. You got to expect a little bit of a bounce back here, right? I do. Now, let me throw you some numbers for Burrow, okay? 4 meetings with Kansas City. Obviously, playoffs count as well. He's completed 70.3% of his passes. He's averaged 313 passing yards against the Chiefs and 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and we know the record, 3-1. You want to give me 5.5 points on the road? I sort of lean to the Bengals. I like them 2-1 to win it, and I lean to the under 47.5, Scotty.
I like the under. Joe, I was looking when I found out that T. Higgins wasn't going to play, and then we were all worried about Jamar Chase, right?
Yeah.
Take a look at the other Cincinnati wide receivers. And it was just like the epiphany of like, oh, my God. There is like nobody on that team. Without Tyler Boyd, remember, he left as well. I mean, it's a who's who of absolute nobodies. Their leading receiver was a 6th-round draft choice out of Princeton, for goodness sake, this past week. I mean, that team is so razor thin. I don't know. And I love Cincinnati. I do, but it was just like, oh, my goodness.
I'm going to take the points. I know. Close your eyes and take them, Scotty. Joey Silk to the promised land. When we come back, we'll talk about some other upsets potentially in week number 2.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and SiriusXM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
All right, looking at some of the games in week number 2, we left off talking about Joey Silk and the Cincinnati Bengals, 5.5-point dogs against Pat Mahomes and Kansas City. Scott wanted to know and said that they're not paying anybody at wide receiver. They certainly aren't. Trenton Irwin, Charlie Jones, Jermaine Burton, the rookie out of Alabama, and then they're holding 4 tight ends, all from Michigan, Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, and Mike Gesicki. You tell me what Cincinnati's doing with the wideouts. I mean, outside of Higgins and Chase, they have nobody.
Yeah. And, who are they paying at this point, Joe? We talked about it in the break, right? I mean, they're paying Joey B, okay, but every team is paying their quarterback, $35, $40 million. So outside of him, they don't have Jamar Chase on a monster contract yet, right? They're not paying T. Higgins. They franchised him. So who's taking up the salary cap space? And they knew these quarterbacks, they knew Joey B wants to throw the football, right? They lose Mixon. They don't want to pay him. So, who they think they were going to be throwing the ball to, even if Chase and Higgins were healthy? You always got to have at least 3 wide receivers. I mean, like I said, no joke. That one guy from Princeton, a 6th-round draft choice, had tied for the most targets this past week. No wonder they couldn't score. So I don't know how they're going to keep up with Kansas
in the Ivy. Princeton had one of the higher scoring offenses over the past 3 years. What are you kidding? I do want to bring this up. Because I watched the second half of Tampa Bay and Jaden Daniels with Washington. They're 1.5-point favorites at home against Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. We know Daniel Jones owns the Commanders, right?
He does.
That is the one team that he actually is undefeated against in regards to his NFL career. They're catching 1.5 based off of what you saw last week, right? And knowing what we have this week with the numbers favoring the Giants. Can you pull the trigger at plus 102 and plus 1? I can't do it, Scott. I cannot do it. I can't do it. I'm going to take the Commanders. I'm going to buck the trend this week.
Yeah, and I tell you, they even beat the Commanders twice last year without Daniel Jones. That's how much this team owns Washington for some goofy reason, right? Like Joey beat him one game.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's a pick 'em, basically, Scott. It's a pick 'em.
Yeah, you got to go with Washington, right? I mean, they were getting booed, Joe. The Giant fans set the record for fastest to turn on your team. They were booed on their first possession. They lost like 5 yards in their first down, 4 on their second down. It was 3rd and 19. I'm watching the game, and you can hear the boos on TV. First possession of the first game of the season. So, I mean, they were booing Daniel Jones when he walked out of the locker room after the game. I you know what? I got to go with Washington. I thought that was a tough spot for them. I thought Tampa Bay was a great, under the radar pick. No one was talking about that game for some reason. I love Tampa Bay, but I think Washington at home will play better. I think the fan base is all excited there. I think Dan Quinn can get the win.
And let me say this: I said I was impressed in regards to and even though it was in come from behind situation, very impressed. I actually thought Kingsbury started to get into a little bit of a rhythm with Daniels. Daniels started to get comfortable in regards to reading the defense. He was checking down. I liked what I saw out of that offense. I think it'll carry through against the New York Giants. Part of me wants to take the 44.5 in regards to the over, but I'm concerned, Scott, because I think I could get at least 20 out of Washington, right? 20, 23. What are the Giants giving you? Are they giving you 14? Yep. Are they giving you 21? I mean, that's the problem. I'd hate to take the over and watch a carbon copy about what played out in regards to Minnesota, where your offense gets absolutely nothing and he's turning the football over constantly.
Yeah, that's a lot of points. You're going to need almost, 2 touchdowns plus, right? 17 points out of the losing team. And then, almost to 27 or so, we'll say, out of the winning team. That's a lot of touchdowns. I can see both teams maybe moving the ball a little bit, but it's one thing to move it, and it's another thing to actually score TDs versus field goals. So that's a lot. I'm surprised that number is actually that high, to tell you the truth.
Are you? Why, you thought it would be in the area of about 41 or so? I actually thought last week, Scott,
Giants are a strong under team. They're a monster under team.
Weren't you shocked, though, the Tampa Bay line was 42.5 with Washington? I thought with Baker, and I thought that line should have been 46, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they readjusted now. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll be back tomorrow and Friday talking about the Week 2 slate for our great producer, Danny Ohlers, Scott Wetzel. I'm Lisi. We'll see you tomorrow.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.